Okay, good morning. Welcome, everyone. City of Tampa and surrounding area. We are so excited to have a presentation today specifically for you. It is called the 2026 Tropical Outlook, which is going to be presented by the City of Tampa today with John Antapasis from the Emergency Management Team, Fire Rescue area. He is the director, followed by a presentation by a very predominant public adjusting firm with Steve Mason, a vice president on, with Altieri Insurance Consultants. And then we're going to close a final presentation for another 30 minutes with local attorney in the Tampa area, Amy Boggs. She's been around for about 20 years. So I am Peggy West. I'm the organizer. I would like to just say a few things for housekeeping, or one thing for sure. We take our questions and answers through the Q&A box. So if you have any questions along the way, please do so, because Steve Mason has so generously volunteered to be today's moderator, and he will answer the questions as we go along intermittently. And then we'll have a short session afterward with the panelists as well. So let's get started here. I'm going to turn this over to John Antapasis. Again, he is the Director for Emergency Management Team, Fire Rescue Group in the City of Tampa, and he's going to do the first presentation. So welcome, John.
Thank you, Peggy, for having me join you. Good morning, everybody. Again, John Antapasis with Emergency Management with the City of Tampa under Tampa Fire Rescue. We will be going into hurricane preparedness. And before we jump into the agenda, I just wanted to give a quick background of my history with the city and in the field of emergency management. I've been working in emergency management after Hurricane Katrina, about 16 years doing emergency management. I did a lot of recovery work in Louisiana and Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Since that time, I've worked a lot of different storms and have done deployments across the state of Florida. Hurricane Irma in the city of Tampa, Hurricane Michael up in the Panhandle, Bay County area. For Hurricanes Ian, it was in the city of Tampa, but then I deployed down to Fort Myers for 2 weeks to assist them with that response and recovery. Idalia, and then in 2024, we had the back-to-back storms, historic storms with Hurricanes Helene and Milton. A lot of other smaller tropical storms, near misses, Hurricane Dorian, things of that nature. And then our office also does work large special events within the city of Tampa and the state of Florida. I have worked and prepared for Super Bowl LV when it came to Tampa, and the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl, which was a huge feat for us. College football championship in 2017. And then earlier this year, I worked with the city of Miami for the FIFA World Cup. And then our annual huge celebration of Gasparilla in the city of Tampa that we prepare for every year. Also, our office isn't just hurricanes, even though we're going to focus heavily on that today. We do work all hazards in our office, whether it's flooding, pandemics like COVID-19, social unrest, infrastructure failures, things of that nature. Our office is that all hazards approach. And since 2020, we've been very busy. So for our agenda today, I plan to go over the 2026 tropical outlook, give a little meteorology background of what we're walking into for the rest of the season, as we are in the height of the hurricane season for 2026 currently. I'll give an overview of our emergency management program, what we do at the city of Tampa, and of course, working very closely with Hillsborough County as well. Getting your business and your families prepared. And then I have at the end a bunch of resources, and then can open it up for any questions that you may have as attendees today. So for our 2026 tropical outlook, I'll go into a little bit of the meteorology and some of the stats. Our meteorologists over at the National Weather Service and our National Hurricane Center partners have been sharing with us, so we can get those details to you. But I do like little cartoons when I jump in, especially going back to 2017 with Hurricane Irma. You know, we do a lot of outreach in the public in the city of Tampa, and there have been a lot of newcomers that are not Floridians that have moved into our area since COVID. And we just really want to make sure, you know, that 2017 and even some past storms from even then with Irma, that folks aren't surprised that storms do occur and there is a risk there, and to get prepared early. You can't imagine how many times we speak with folks and there's just, you know, they don't have that personal experience dealing with hurricanes and then really how to prepare, and they don't take it as seriously as they should. So, with these outreach efforts, we really want to promote, to get ahead early on this, be prepared. Don't be that person getting in line last minute at your Publix's, Home Depots to try to get supplies as the storms are coming through. Because again, a lot of those supplies get depleted very quickly in those moments. So getting prepared really early is really key. So, like with many on the call, especially if you're in the Tampa Bay area, we've been really busy over the last few seasons. Since 2021 to 25, we've had 86 named storms that have occurred in the Atlantic Basin. More U.S. landfall Category 4 and 5 storms, those major top-end category storms, since 2017 than we saw from basically the mid-60s up into 2016. So the stats are there. There is more frequency of these major storms and landfalls that have been occurring. And 10 major hurricanes have struck the Gulf Coast since 2017. And you see on the picture on the left-hand side there, from Harvey in 2017, Laura. Unfortunately, Louisiana has had multiple storms coming right through their state. And then Hurricane Michael, big impacts to that community over in Panama City, Bay County area. And then obviously then for 2022, we had Ian, and then in 24 with Milton and Helene. So 2020 was our most named storms. And then in 2024 was the costliest season to date with that $182 billion price tag that came with that season. So again, very historic damages that occurred for us, and especially within the city of Tampa. With Hurricane Helene and Milton, just those two storms back to back, we almost had $1 billion in damage just within the city limits. So big impacts to our community. And then in 2025, fortunately for us in our area, it was a quieter season, and we're hoping very much so for 2026. So for the Atlantic season last year, like I was just saying, it was that quieter year, and we were grateful for it after coming out of the Helene and Milton impacts that we did have. And again, just to touch base, there was still some major storms. We did have Hurricane Melissa down in Jamaica, a very devastating storm for that community. But fortunately for the continental U.S., we did miss, especially in the Atlantic Basin, we did miss any real big impacts last year. Going into our season currently, and this is the revised probability of the hurricane season outlook from the National Hurricane Center. They are now expecting a lower than normal season, and that has been revised down. They're looking at 713 storm names for the season. We currently have Dolly out there in the Atlantic that is anticipated with the wind shear and the El Nino situation and the drier air that's in the Caribbean currently, that it will dissipate before it moves on to our area. So currently there is no risk to the state of Florida, according to the state of Florida, what they've been giving us our reports. But we are still in the heat of the season. And what we'll see here, as I said, we have Dolly here, which is anticipated to dissipate. And obviously, we were just talking offline before, but right on time for Dolly Parton with her passing recently, that name is there. But these are the names for the rest of the season as we continue into the height of it. Excuse me, I think my presentation is frozen. Peggy, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good, John, but yeah, you may want to just stop sharing and maybe start sharing again.
Yeah, let me try that real quick. Oh, there we go.
I thought it was my computer.
There we go. Can you guys see the screen back up?
It's still at the same page.
Oh, it's still at the same page. Let me see this. Let me stop sharing real quick.
There you go.
Just remember, everybody, put your questions into Q&A. This is all about the city of Tampa, what they offer in the surrounding areas. And if there's any other officials on in the surrounding cities, please feel free to make comments.
Are you able
Okay,
to see it
John,
pop back up now?
you're back.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. But as I was saying, we are in that peak season right now. So that August to mid-October is really our peak season. And even specifically on the west coast of Florida, we really do see those impacts occur into that beginning of October to mid-October as those cold fronts start coming down and potentially do energize off that Yucatan Peninsula and come up like we saw with Hurricane Michael. Going back to that season in 2018, that was a tropical depression that came off the Yucatan. And then within 2 days, we had a major hurricane in the Gulf. And many folks that may be on the call that have grown up in the Tampa Bay area, that the Gulf storms don't leave us a lot of time to get prepared. So that really, on our side, on the west coast of Florida, the Panhandle, we do have to stay a little bit extra vigilant because of how quick those storms can spin up in the Gulf with the warm waters in the shallow depths that are there. So as you see, we're going to be getting into the peak of the season, which is going into the beginning of September. So there is, usually each season we start seeing a lot more activity. And then on the screen here is the historical reference of hurricanes and tropical storms, and then hurricanes in yellow there. Real quickly, just to show by months, just to see how the season usually plays out. Usually in June, those Gulf storms can appear. They're usually those smaller intensity tropical depressions and tropical storms that can develop in that June timeline. And in July, there is a little bit more activity off in the Atlantic waters near the Caribbean. But then as you can see here, this is where the occurrences occur of these tropical cyclones, hurricanes, and tropical storms or depressions. So now we start seeing a lot more activity, and especially into September. We really get more often those Cape Verde storms. Those are those tropical waves we get off of Africa that go thousands of miles off the Atlantic. And then as they potentially go into that warmer waters near the Caribbean, they tend to spin up. So that's where a lot more of that activity occurs. And then, as I was stating before, in October, with those cold fronts that can come down, we do see some tropical activity that does occur in the beginning of October to mid-October off that Yucatan Peninsula that has spun up some historic storms back into the Gulf. So an overview of our emergency management program, what programs we provide to residents in the city of Tampa. This is a picture the day after Hurricane Helene. We did feeding operations in the community over in the Davis Islands area, Palmetto Beach area, West Shore area. If you're familiar with those areas, they were heavily hit by Hurricane Helene, which was our storm surge event. We had about 7 feet of storm surge that came with that event for the city of Tampa, with a lot of extreme flooding that happened to that community. Folks lost everything. And at the bare minimum, right off the bat, we worked with our partners, Salvation Army, American Red Cross, to get out some feeding. We assisted with some cleanup efforts out in the community. But it was a huge impact to our community that night. And as I stated earlier, our office isn't just about hurricanes, but these are all the different hazards we've had identified in our emergency operations plans that we have to prepare for our city, and that we get out preparedness information out to the public, because it is more than that. Folks remember back in 2014, we had historic severe thunderstorm flooding that happened in the South Tampa area. That can occur in any summer day where we get those heavy storms like that. And then, as I said before, the COVID-19 pandemic, we have to prepare for terrorism, things of that nature as well with MacDill Air Force Base. We work very closely with them. But again, there's a whole host of hazards that the city of Tampa does have to prepare for, and our program takes a lead on coordination. So quickly, I'll just go over our 2 real roles that we have in our office. We have our day-to-day roles. Disasters every day, but we have to prepare for those as our city and as a community. And then we go into our emergency roles during our gray skies. So during our blue skies, we have an emergency operations center that we have to ensure is ready 24/7 with updated communications, software systems, things of that nature, as well as training. We update our emergency plans. We actually exercise hurricane scenarios every year before we go into the season. We do it here locally at the city of Tampa, as well as we work with the state of Florida to do that exercise every year. And that ensures that any plan updates that we have, that we execute those in an exercise scenario. We do a lot of public outreach like we're doing currently today, but also that we do that right in with the community, with HOAs, property managers, businesses, 55 and up, assisted living facilities, things of that nature, to ensure our residents are prepared, because it really is a whole community effort when we're getting our preparedness in place. Because the city of Tampa, from the government side of the house, we can provide a better service if our residents are better prepared. So we try to get ahead of that early. And then finally, also, we do a lot of critical facility hardening and mitigation. Someone that's called, if you're from the city of Tampa, we have the Pipes Project in the city of Tampa. It's a big capital project and a flood reduction project that's been ongoing for the past 8 years under Mayor Castor. And ultimately, these infrastructure projects are to mitigate the risk of these impacts of flooding and storms and things of that nature. So a lot of that work is going on daily through all our teams with Public Works and water and wastewater to help mitigate that risk when those bad days do occur in the city. During gray skies, we operate our emergency operations center. We have 100+ personnel that work in our operations center during activations, but we also have multiple other teams throughout the community to respond during these storms. We monitor severe weather very closely with our partners at National Weather Service in Ruskin and the National Hurricane Center down in Miami to get the latest, greatest of these forecasts as they're coming in. So our leadership can make the best decisions on evacuation orders, sheltering, things of that nature. We do our resource management. And what that entails is the city of Tampa has a lot of resources. We have a very robust fire department, police department, public works team. But even during Helene and Milton, we did not have enough resources to handle everything within the city limits. And the way the state system is set up is we do neighbors helping neighbors during these incidents. So we had teams come in from Jacksonville, from South Florida, from up in the Panhandle area, come support us, as well as the National Guard. And our emergency operations center manages all that coordination of unmet needs and getting those resources to residents during this time of need. As well as our shelter operations, we operate the city shelters within the city limits. And we work very closely with Hillsborough County on the rest of the shelters within the Hillsborough County area. We do points of distribution, which are those sandbags pre-storm, and then post-storm, food, water, and other commodities out to residents that may need so. And then finally, our emergency notifications. Our system is called Alert Tampa. We do mass notifications to the public, and I'll have in a few slides some ways to sign up for that. But that allows us to get the greatest information out to the public so they can make those good decisions in a timely manner. And those are direct notifications from the city of Tampa. Here's a picture of the EOC here, but just to describe the core centralized location in our emergency operations center. I talked about that resource management piece, but information sharing is also a key component. We have a lot of different departments that all have a seat in our emergency operations center, and we want to make sure that we're all sharing that situational awareness with each other, having one unified picture of what's going on between the police department, fire department, public works, code enforcement, mobility, transportation, things of that nature, that we're all understanding what the situation is when the emergency operations center is activated to help facilitate that. Monitoring severe weather. Again, we work closely with our partners at the National Weather Service in Ruskin. We have software systems that are modeling as these storms are coming in. On your left-hand side was Elsa, one of the tropical storms that came through our area back in 2021. And as those models are updated periodically, it's about every 3 hours as those storms are coming in, we're getting updated predictions on storm surge, flooding, things of that nature. And again, to help facilitate those good decisions that we need to make about evacuations to protect life and safety and property. Our emergency response centers, those are three. We have 3 of those in the city of Tampa, and they're about 120 personnel public works teams. And what they do is they hunker down each major storm in these 3 locations. And then as the storm passes, there are first eyes and ears out on the streets because when storm winds get sustained winds get very high, about 50 miles per hour or higher, we actually have to pull our fire apparatus off the streets, our police officers off the streets, because they're not safe to be out there at that point. So that's why, again, it's so important with those evacuation orders when they're made. to leave those areas, because our first responders cannot operate when these conditions due to their own safety, because we can't take care of others if we're not safe. But the first teams that go out are these push teams, and they are a great asset for the city. We clear debris off those critical roadways. So then again, those first responders can start getting in and responding to those calls for service. We identify those initial damages from the storm. We have our chainsaw teams that cut the large trees. In Tampa, we love our large oak trees. During Hurricane Milton, they caused a lot of issues on our roadways to get those cut up, and again, to get that road access going. We also do our public damage assessment, which is our teams that go out and look at all the city infrastructure, get what damages are there, document that for FEMA, so we can get that up for FEMA and understand how big the situation was. And then our code enforcement teams actually go door to door in the city by grid, and they do the private damage assessment, where we take photos of individual homes, and we have a software system called Crisis Track that uses an algorithm with the property appraiser data that we upload each year that gives us an estimate of how much damage did we occur in the city on the private side of the house. And again, those dollar amounts all funnel up through FEMA and ultimately help, if it is bad enough, promote a presidential declaration for us at the city that we can get reimbursement for the city and get those federal assets to come assist us. Again, if it is really a big impact like we saw with Milton or Helene. Points of distribution, I talked about that. Just again, that we will provide sandbags in the city of Tampa before each storm. We actually even do it before the season starts. So if residents and property owners want to get those sandbags ahead of time and you are in the city limits, we do give out sandbags. And then again, post-storm, we get a lot of commodities that come in from around the state, as well as donations, as well as the city, and we distribute those out to the public until grocery stores can resume their operation, and then we will cease those operations. But again, those are humanitarian relief efforts, the water, the food, the tarps, things of that nature. So individuals at least can have some relief as they're starting to recover from these storms. So getting your family and business prepared, like I stated from the beginning of this, the city of Tampa, we do our due diligence to get prepared every season we go in. But ultimately, if our families and businesses are better prepared for these type of incidents, we're going to be better as a whole community to recover from these. Unfortunately, we love our beaches. A lot of folks have moved into this area because of how beautiful Florida really is. I grew up in Florida my entire life, but there is the reality of our geography and the tropics that are here that we have to get prepared for this. And ultimately, these are the ways that you can get prepared as an individual, but then again, as a property owner as well. So getting your family prepared, there's really the three pillars that we look at. It's making a plan, getting a kit, and staying informed. Those are our three main message items that we talk about, and I'll talk about each of these main pillars of preparedness. And making your hurricane plan, obviously, being prepared starts with having that plan in place. If you know you're in an evacuation zone, or first of all, if you even need to know what your evacuation zone, you need to look that up early so you know what evacuation zones that your property or your business is in. And if you do need to evacuate, you should have that planned out ahead of time. Don't, wait until the moment as a storm is threatening our area to begin to figure out where am I going to go? Where is my family going to go? Do I need to come into work and my family needs to go somewhere else? Figure that out ahead of time. That's just good, proper planning. Again, reviewing your insurance. I know we have experts on the line. They're going to be talking about insurance, but going into the season, that is a big one. We've seen huge. I've had many residents call our office about insurance issues that they've had, whether they didn't have insurance, and then with Helene and Milton when it occurred, the differences between flood and hurricane insurance, and all the different details in their insurance plans. It is complicated, but it takes that time on the front end to do that proper planning, understanding what you're covered for in your insurance. Then if it occurs, you're going to be much better prepared to be able to work with your insurance carrier to get that coverage. And then ultimately too, your pets and things of that nature to ensure that they're prepared as well. Knowing your zone, I do have a QR code here on the screen to look up your flood or evacuation zone. If you do click that with your phone, it will pull up a website that you can search that by address. But there is two differences. And again, the flood zone is that federally identified zone that indicates your property's risk of flooding in any given year. And these zones are mapped by the flood insurance rate maps by FEMA. And there's those 3 tiers: high, moderate, and minimal risk zones. And then the evacuation zone is determined, again, Hillsborough County wide, that we're mapped out the National Hurricane Center's storm surge modeling that occurs through Hillsborough County. And that is the evacuation orders. Those zones are when those orders are made to get out of those areas when we're threatened by a storm. One thing of note, if you are in Hillsborough County, this year, those evacuation zones did change. So do look up what your evacuation zone is. More areas that may have been in a zone B now are currently in a zone A. So it has increased quite a bit there, as well as even into evacuation zone E, which is our worst case scenario. More locations now are following in that zone E. So again, the QR code is on the screen. If you don't know your evacuation zone for your property, I do really encourage you to know that zone, and in the event that there is an evacuation order that is made. Preparing your property, another big one. Getting your property ahead of time, getting it prepared by cleaning rain gutters, drain pipes, basic maintenance around your house, removing trees with rotting trunks, things of that nature is really a key piece. We put out a lot of messaging pre-storm, also with patio furniture, debris that's outside, that to bring that all in ahead of time, because that can be flying debris that either will damage your home, damage your neighbor's home, become debris outside that, again, our push teams have to encounter when they're out there in the streets. So doing that ahead of time, even throughout the year, is good practice. But if a storm is threatening our area, these are sort of checklists for your own home preparedness to get that done before the storm occurs in our area, to help mitigate that risk of damage to your property as well. Evacuation shelters. If there is an evacuation order made, there will always be evacuation shelters that are activated. Those are designated schools that serve as shelters throughout Hillsborough County. And again, the city of Tampa partners with Hillsborough County to shelter or to staff the shelters within the city limits, which ultimately are the biggest shelters within the city, within the whole county, or within the city limits. We usually activate ours first. Middleton has about 1,600 clients that we actually sheltered for Milton. So very large shelter operation. And also, as one word of wisdom too, I've worked many shelters in my career. It really is that last option. Of course, it's going to be a safe location for our residents to get into and ride out the storm. But it is not a cruise ship. It is a lifeboat. And, many folks that, may get into a shelter, there's some expectations that they believe, but ultimately, we try to promote that as much as possible. And with the QR code on the screen, there's more details about what shelters are. But ultimately, our residents will get a safe place on the floor in an area. And again, there will be feeding that's going on there as well, but it is not a hotel type situation. So if you do plan ahead of time and you have friends or family that are outside the evacuation zone, that is probably one of your best planning efforts, to go ahead and organize that to evacuate there, a hotel, or some other option like that. But again, as that last resort, we will activate our shelters when there's an evacuation order. And here's some photos of shelters. Again, on the left-hand screen is some of the expectations of what a shelter is going to look like, where it's nice and neat and clean. And again, it's going to be a different situation, more like on the right-hand screen, where again, you'll have a safe location to be with a large group. And again, with Milton, we had about 1,600 folks that were sheltered just within that school. So again, a large amount of people within a group, but it is a hardened facility that you will be in a safe location as a last resort. Another option too, if there's individuals in your community or in your property that don't have transportation, HART does activate emergency evacuation routes when there is an evacuation order. And those are all the routes on the screen here, as well as if you go to gohart.org, there is a map of that. And those are pickup locations that anywhere on that route, an individual can just raise their hand on the route. The bus will pick them up and they will take them directly to a shelter. So for that safe location. If there is an individual within your property that has any special needs, there is a special needs assistance call, and the phone number is on the screen as well, with Sunshine Line and the Heart Line. There are buses as well that during evacuations, you can call that number. And again, if you can't get to one of these routes, they will organize a bus pickup for you to get you to one of the shelters as well. And then special needs shelters, those are different than our general population shelters. And what those are for individuals with special needs, whether you have a medical condition that you need to ensure that you're on electrical power, you need oxygen, dialysis, you have physical, cognitive, or other medical conditions, there are special needs shelters within the city of Tampa, Irwin Tech, USF. We have a few other locations with Hillsborough County Department of Health that we work with to ensure that individuals with special needs have a safe location, they have the equipment in place, they have electric power throughout the storm. But the one caveat of that is they have to register early. And the QR code is on the screen, as well as the Department of Health's phone number. Folks do need to register within that system. It does take about 30 days to process that system. And the point of that is if you do need specialized equipment, the Department of Health has to coordinate to ensure that that's there, that your name is on the roster, and again, that they can provide all that support for that individual. So again, if there's any residents within your properties that may have special needs or need to be aware of it, the QR code's on the screen. And again, the Department of Health website lets folks register for that early. We find with each storm, individuals try to register for this at the last moment. And again, it's a hard feat to pull all that additional equipment in for individuals that are trying to register last moment. So that is definitely something to get registered early for. Even if you don't use it, again, it's still highly recommended to get registered early. So then building your disaster kit. Again, build your kit. We all, most probably on this call lived through Helene and Milton. And really some of the messaging I try to promote is, what did you learn during those storms? What did you wish you had? Not having power for many days. And again, at the bare minimum, you need that 1 gallon of water per person. And really for 7 days is key. And that's not just for your drinking water, that's for your cleaning and things of that nature. Canned food, non-perishable food. A NOAA weather backup radio is also a great asset to add to your kit as well, because again, without power, we can't turn into those Fox 13s and things of that nature sometimes. So again, having that weather radio, you're going to get that emergency broadcast messaging regardless. Looking at backup power for your home, whether it's generators, things of that nature, and even the portable batteries that I know Amazon sells many of them. I have them in my personal preparedness kit. Getting those ahead of time is really key. And then we have a full laundry list of different supplies and checklists that you may want to consider at tampa.gov/hurricane. And then maintaining it is also a key piece. Each year, especially after last year with a quiet year, make sure your canned food's in a cool, dry place. Store it. The way I have it in my house, I have one of those big Tupperware boxes. And I have all my supplies in one big box. So when you do need it, you have it organized, you pull it out, you have your supplies. And again, if you're missing anything in the off season, you can replace it. Or if there is a storm and you use it, and again, you can replace it going into the next season. And then your expired items as well. And being prepared to shelter at work for 24 hours. So if you do have an emergency job like myself, again, you may need a go kit. Have those supplies on hand. So again, so your family's prepared. They're able to stay through the storm at home. And then if you have to come into work, you have all those supplies you needed to keep that continuity to keep you at work and being able to accomplish your job during these storms. And then staying informed, that's our third big pillar. And again, in Tampa, we call it Alert Tampa. But if you're in different communities throughout the Tampa Bay region, everyone has a version of this, whether it's Ready Panelists, HCFL Alert with Hillsborough County and unincorporated Hillsborough. And again, these are our emergency alert systems that I really highly recommend that you register for. Because again, during these situations, that's the way governments are notifying our public of different information that's going on, whether those pods are activated, evacuation orders, shelters. And again, in 2026, the media, the internet, there's a lot of news and information flowing around, and some of it's not accurate. So, I really urge folks, get to the primary source at your local government of the information that you need to make good decisions. And again, those notification systems are really key to getting that information directly to you. Another couple things, if you live in the city of Tampa, we do have live weather stations as well set up, hillsborough.weatherstem.com. We set weather stations up in 5 of our fire districts. And what that allows, even day to day, if you want to see if there's a thunderstorm up in New Tampa or South Tampa, you can see the live camera feeds and get that real hyper local data of weather that's occurring. which I find is just great to know because I'm sure many on this call are from Florida. It could be pouring rain over in West Tampa, but by the time you get to Brandon, it's a dry, hot, sunny day. So really a great resource from the city here. And then our hurricane preparedness guides. This year, the city of Tampa developed our first hurricane preparedness guide. And it really is a comprehensive resource guide that adds a lot more to what Hillsborough County had offered for many years, including our city-specific programs. And we have it available both in English and Spanish. We have a lot of copies, and we've been pushing that out to the public. If you or your property wants guides for your residents, please email tampaoem@tampagov.net. And we can compile as many copies as you may need for your residents. But also, if you just want a digital copy of that, you can go to our website at tampa.gov/hurricane or the QR code on the screen. And again, that provides a comprehensive list of hurricane preparedness information and resources for our residents to get prepared for the season. Our Hurricane Reentry Hang Tag program, that's another program our office administers. And what this program is after an evacuation order, Tampa Police Department has a reentry program where they have entry points coming back south of 275, and mostly of the evacuation areas south of 275. And what these hang tags allow more visibility for our police officers to know that these individuals belong within these areas. What we found in past storms like Hurricane Ian was many of the islands like Sanibel Island, Pine Island, Fort Myers Beach, many folks from outside the area wanted to, come, for lack of a better word, disaster tourists come in to see the damage. And it causes a lot of issues during the cleanup, whether it's from the public works teams, our law enforcement officers, but also, there's, crime that happens after these storms, because as you can imagine, there's an opportunity for criminals to come into areas after everyone's evacuated to rob homes. So again, from the police department side, this provides them visibility with these hang tags to ensure that folks that are in these disaster zones are visible, that they belong to be there. But ultimately, if you do not have these hang tags, it will not restrict you from getting back into the area, but it will make it much quicker, that you won't have to be showing your ID each time you get back through that reentry point. And again, the website's on the page if you're in the city of Tampa and you're south of 275, tampa.gov/hang tag, and you can request those hang tags. Our volunteer program, again, to highlight this as our community emergency response team, which has been a great success in the city. We did a full revamp of this program in 2021. And what this has allowed is our residents to go through a series of modules to get better prepared just as personal preparedness, whether it's CPR, AED, fire extinguisher, hurricane preparedness, and a host of other topics that they go through during this curriculum. And then ultimately, if a resident does want to give back to the community, you can become a formal volunteer with the city of Tampa through a background check. And some of the photos you see here, especially on the left-hand side, during Hurricane Helene and Milton, our volunteers assisted a lot of the work that we did as well. We have about 5,000 employees in the city of Tampa, but during these storms, it is even above and beyond what we can handle. So our our community volunteers, they really add a lot to our community. So we try to promote this program. And again, we have literature on this. If back at your properties, you want to share things of that with your residents, we always look to get more residents involved in this program. We just recently finished a course 3 weeks ago. We'll have our next one in mid-October, but it's been a big success for the community as well. And then public preparedness, like we're doing today, that's what we do in the community often. We get out there, we do speaking engagements with residents throughout the year. We go down to MacDill Air Force Base. We talk with CENTCOM, SOCOM, and military personnel as well. And, after this call, if your property is interested in requesting one of us from our team to do a hurricane preparedness outreach for your residents, you can always shoot us an email at tampaoem@tampagov.net. And you can request one of our speakers to come out and give a presentation similar to this directly to your residents. And then starting to close up here, we are very active on social media as well. So I know, as a millennial myself, many of us are on social media, and we get a lot of our information from social media. So @Alert Tampa is our Facebook, X, and Instagram account. And during storms or other emergencies, we get out a lot of great information on those platforms to kind of amplify that Alert Tampa notification messaging. So if you are on these social media platforms, or your property has a social media platform and you want to reshare information that the city is providing, I do highly recommend to follow our account on there, because again, during storms, we're going to provide a lot of that information out on social media as well. And then this slide deck, Ms. Peggy has a copy of it. We're definitely willing to share that out to the group. I had a lot of hyperlinks from the information I talked to today, again, to get you that resources directly with those hyperlinks. And then the wrap up, again, those main pillars is really my key takeaway. Again, if you could share that with your community members, get prepared early, get those hurricane kits, get those supplies early. The governor in the state of Florida there is a tax exemption now on hurricane preparedness supplies throughout the year. So in the past, we had to wait those weeks to get those tax incentives. That is in place now throughout the year. So there is no, really excuse to not get these supplies early if you can. And even sort of piecemeal it. You don't have to buy everything in one shopping time, but adding things throughout the season as you're going grocery shopping, things of that nature, to build out your kit is really key. And knowing your evacuation zone, having a plan ahead of time, and then signing up for those emergency alerts is really key. But again, I appreciate everybody on the call listening to this information, and I am open if there's any questions from the group and anything else anyone wants to discuss. But I again appreciate your time in hearing our information today.
Awesome, John. Thank you so much. Could I ask you one more time, what was the email for setting up a outreach at your community? I had Tampa OEM at, and then my pen ran out.
Yep, at tampagov.net.
At tampagov.net. Okay, and I'll put that on the sponsor sheet that's going to go out. Okay, great. Well, that was awesome. I don't know if anybody on today knew that these services were available. And John, I am glad to host this again a couple times throughout the year for you in the future. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Steve Mason.
Hello, everybody. John, that was great. Do me and stop shared so I can bring up mine. There you go. Great information. Thanks everybody for joining us today. There's 2 questions. We get the certificates. This is not a CE course, so we don't issue certificates, but we do appreciate your attendance, as this is very important information. Coming from somebody born and raised in Miami all his whole life, going through all these storms year after year, there's never too much information. So let me just bring up my presentation. Let's share that. Let's share. Everybody can see my presentation there? Yes? Okay.
Yes, but you have
all right. Welcome. I have a condensed version of a presentation that we do that talks about hurricane claims. As John mentioned earlier, Altieri Insurance Consultants, we are insurance professionals. We do a lot of free consultant work for all types of policy owners, homeowners, condo associations, etc. But our main job is public adjusting. We are headquartered in downtown Tampa. We've been in business almost 40 years already. So we are a local family establishment. Our sole mission is to advance our clients' claims through precision, persistence, and professionalism. I can't tell you how many times that we've seen so many people dealing with the tragedy and then realizing that now they have to deal with the aftermath of the storm, not just in repairs, but in dealing with the insurance company. And that's what we're for. We're here to help you guys navigate that process. We've been very active from Hurricane Helene, Ian, Milton, Irma, Michael, all over the state over the last several years, helping a lot of policyholders recover adequate amounts to make their repairs and taking that burden off their shoulders, both property managers and policy owners, of having to deal with the insurance company. Just a little bit about myself, my background. I was in the condominium management field for 20 years. Then 7 years ago, I decided I want to help associations from the outside. So I started doing insurance claim work. I love it. My favorite part of my job is delivering checks to my client. And it always puts a smile on their face. So I enjoy, especially hurricane situations, when we see our clients get money quickly so they can begin their repairs and pick up their debris, so they can move back into their homes as quickly as possible. So the ugly behind the scenes is what's going on with insurance companies, and we've seen a lot of headlines lately since Hurricane Ian hit the Fort Myers, Sanibel area. And there's been a lot of delays and what's happening and why are the money's being offered so low and what's going on. And 60 Minutes had an episode they released literally a day after Hurricane Helene hit, where whistleblowers came together and said the insurance companies were changing their own estimates. And when I say their own, the adjusters that are sent by the insurance companies. I can't emphasize enough in hurricane situations that you have proper representation. It's a burden for you just to recover from these storms and start the documentation process and the repair process, but have proper representation. It expedites the whole thing and protects all of your interests. And, the goal is to get you properly compensated and utilizing your insurance policy for which it was designed. We're just going to go over a couple things. I'm going to talk about what we do and how we operate. Talk about little preventative measures you can take before the storm. A couple of slides on filing a claim and a couple things about your insurance policies when we're dealing with community associations, and then some preparation before that. There are 3 types of adjusters, 2 of which work for the insurance company. A staff claims adjuster solely works for that insurance company. They're also known as desk adjusters. They don't go out into the field. Independent adjusters is who the insurance company sends out into the field. Now, in a storm situation, and this is very key, independent adjusters get inundated. They get assigned 200 to 300 claims because there's so much damage that the storm causes. A lot of these insurance companies are bringing independent adjusters from out of state. And a lot of these independent adjusters don't know or not familiar with Florida laws. A lot of independent adjusters are just no idea about your policy language. Their job is simply to come up with a damage estimate, do an inspection, get to the next one. And as I said, they're inundated. They'll have 300 to 400 claims assigned to each one. And sometimes, and unfortunately, they do drive-by inspections and just come up with a dollar amount, which is also known as setting a reserve. It's so important to set that reserve accurately in the beginning because it expedites the whole process, and you're dealing with a number that's the right number. A public adjuster is the only adjuster that represents the policyholder. Like I said, it's so important to have representation, and that's via a public adjuster. And getting us out there right after the storm, we will help set that reserve to the right dollar amount. So we don't have to come in later and uphill battle saying, hey, independent adjuster, you set the reserve too low. Here's why. So having us involved immediately to help you sets the reserve correctly, and we're able to start getting money and advance payments approved. So you're using claim dollars to start picking up your debris rather than having to get a bank loan or special assess or you pull from your reserves. Now, there was a third-party study done several years ago that shows when you hire a public adjuster, your payout is on average 747% more than what the original offer is by the insurance company. 747% more is a lot of money. And in some cases, and we have case studies that are even higher than that. So I can't emphasize enough, and you'll probably hear me say it a couple more times, have representation via a public adjuster when these storms hit, because there's a lot of details that go in the way these storms have to be reported. And we're going to talk about not just on your windstorm policy, but also on your flood policy. We like to ask the question, would you let the IRS do your taxes, as an analogy? Well, of course not. Why would you let the insurance company decide how much they're going to pay you? And you shouldn't. So like I said, always consider, if you have a great public adjuster and you have a great relationship, I'm not here to try to steal business from anybody. Fantastic. You're making the right decision by using one. But if you don't, by all means, give us a call. And we hope to be that go-to public adjuster for you. Oop, went too far. When we're involved, like I said, we quarterback everything from start to finish. And in hurricanes, our first mission is to develop what's called a rough order magnitude report, a ROM report. And this rough order magnitude report is something we get started and complete within the first few days of coming out to the property. And by the time the insurance adjuster gets there, we give them a copy of this report and say, can we agree on these damages? Now, this is a report of the obvious stuff. Oh, the roof is gone. Okay, well, that's obvious. Windows have been blown out. There's cracks, here and there. Water damage. Can we agree on this stuff? All the punctures we see in the roof, what have you. And they agree onto it, and that's when we say, okay, well, let's get an advance payment out for our client now. Let's say $1.2 million. And I'm using an example in my head of somebody we did this for in Fort Myers Beach after Hurricane Ian hit. And it was probably a $16 million final claim, but we got him $1.2 million advance payment in the first couple months. So they utilized that money, claim dollars, to pay their debris cleanup invoices and to start their repair process as more monies came in month over month. So that's our process. That's what we do. And then we start documenting the rest of the damages via a very specific and elaborate construction estimate that can be anywhere from 300 to 600 pages, detailing every square footage of the property and all the damages there. Insurance adjusters love it when the client hires a public adjuster in a hurricane situation because we do the work for them. And as I said, they're inundated with 300 to 400 claims they have to deal with. So the smarter ones enjoy it when, like, hey, okay, you're doing all the work for me. You're doing the detail inspection that they don't do. And, we come across this a lot when we visit clients. They say, we have an adjuster already. We have an adjuster. And I want to be absolutely clear. That independent adjuster is not your adjuster. That independent adjuster is the adjuster representing the insurance company. When you file a claim, you're filing a claim against the insurance company. So they're going to do everything in their power to settle that claim as low as they can. And they may delay it as long as they can. So it depends. Again, why it's so important to have representation, especially during a hurricane situation. So filing a claim, as I mentioned, you're going to file a windstorm claim under your wind policy, and then you're going to file a flood. Flood is completely different. Flood has a whole new set of rules on the way these claims have to be submitted. Flood is the same for every community association. So for condominium associations, you have 17 items that are covered. That's it, with a maximum of $250,000 of coverage per first floor unit. Now, storm surge in a hurricane is flood. We saw flood affect 2 stories in Hurricane Ian because the storm surge was so high. So anything the surge damages, which causes the most of the damage, depending on the size of the storm, will fall under the flood policy. And as I said, they're very specific. And if you don't submit the claim and you don't have your contractor submit the invoices in a certain way, that can delay the whole process. So what's the answer? Have a public adjuster manage the process. We will go in, and a lot of the times you'll see the flood representative do this. No, that's wind, and the wind people, no, that's flood. And they start pointing fingers back and forth at each other. Having us involved, we'll do our own construction and repair estimate. Flood, this is yours. Wind, this is yours. Get started. And it expedites the whole process. Again, getting us in right after the incident is advantageous for so many reasons, but just moving the piles along and the claim along forward is our goal. Is we want to get you paid and get you enough money to make the proper repairs as quickly as possible. As I mentioned, NFIP, it's a government program. It's the same for every condominium association out there. So there's no variation. There's certain things that are covered. Does it all make sense? No, of course not. It's a government program. I will say if you don't have flood insurance, does not mean you shouldn't have flood insurance. I give an example all the time. After Hurricane Ian, we had a 4-building community under a master near Sanibel Island, not before the bridge. And 3 of those buildings had flood insurance and 1 didn't. Why didn't the one building have flood insurance? because the flood mapping said they weren't required anymore. So they elected not to buy any. Well, of course, that's the building that called us. And I'm sitting there standing in their living room saying there's fish in your living room, but you have no insurance because you decided to save some money and you live right here, near the bridge to Sanibel Island. The other three buildings were required. So mapping makes no sense. Please consider if you don't have flood coverage to get flood coverage. Because as I said, when a storm comes in, all the damage caused by the surge, it's flood. I live on the East Coast. I don't live next to the beach, but I live a mile away from the Everglades. And I don't know if one day a storm's going to come from the west and all that water from the Everglades is going to come into my house. And I have Wally the alligator in my backyard thinking he has a new home there. I have flood coverage, although I'm not required to because I'm far enough away from the beach. I've learned, I'm going to spend a little extra money to protect my property. So that's the lesson. If you do not have flood coverage, please consider getting it, especially if you're near any type of body of water. This is an important Florida statute I like to review with everybody. All the HOA managers know 620 and the condo managers know 718. Well, 627.70132. This is your statute of limitations of how long you have to file a claim. Now, why do I like to emphasize this? Because A, you should know it, but B, this law's changed 3 times over the last 6 years. 6 years ago, you had 5 years to file a claim. And I took advantage of that. So let's just go back to Hurricane Irma that hit in 2017. In 2019, I myself in my home started noticing water spots on my roof, and I found that curious. So I had a roofer come out. He said, all my tiles were loose from high winds from Irma. I was like, really? Interesting. I filed a claim. I got a new roof. I could not do that today because then the law changed to 3 years. And now it changed to 1 year. And only an extra 6 months after that year to file a supplemental claim. So don't assume you don't have any damages. I just got a few little leaks. I come across this a lot, and we're going to talk about windows in a minute, but have someone check out the property. It doesn't cost you anything. Have a public adjuster come out. If you have a relationship with a great engineer, hey, just look at my property, my envelope, my structural, my windows and doors, and my roof. Just look at that because you don't want to miss this window of opportunity if you do have damages. You may have damages that's related to wind that's unrecognizable by the naked eye from any lay manager. But an engineer may recognize it or a public adjuster may recognize it because this is what we do for a living. So it doesn't cost you anything but time to make a phone call and say, hey, can you come look at my property? Even though the storm was miles away, I just want to make sure. Irma affected the West Coast more than the East Coast, but we had so many properties with damages on this East Coast. But there's a lot of properties that didn't know they had damages. We'll get into that in a second. But learn this Florida statute. You have 1 year to file a claim. Don't waste any time. Don't hesitate. Obviously, you're going to talk to insurance agents, and that's fine. They're an important resource for you. But just understand that's the time limit you have. Now I'm seeing people that are trying to file claims for Milton. I'm like, it's too late. And Helene, I'm like, sorry, your timetable's up. And we can't file a supplemental either because the deadline has passed. But know those deadlines. It's so important. And if you have to sue the insurance company, you only have a 5-year statute of limitations for that. So that hasn't changed. It's always been 5 year, but hopefully you don't have to sue. I'm happy to say that we settled 90 to 94% of our claims without having to go to litigation. But if you do, you have to trust the lawyers. And I tell everybody, do not hire a lawyer off a billboard. We don't go to bus stops and look for resources. This is why we do events today. You're going to meet a great attorney today. And Amy's going to talk about the great work she does. And we've worked with her in the past. So this is why we do these events. So you hire reputable companies to represent your community during these tragic times. This is an endorsement in your insurance policy. We're going to talk a little bit about your insurance policy when it comes to condominium ordinance. The law is very important. And every policy pretty much has this. But you should know what it is in case you don't, and have a conversation with your agent. Ordinance and law covers any excess expenses due to any code upgrades as a result of repair. You have to have. A story that I tell a lot is when I was a property manager, I had a pipe burst and on the top floor, and the water came all the way down to my lobby. And of all places where it came out is where my fire panel was, and shorted out my fire panel. So when I had to replace that, so my property policy covered the water damage, my equipment policy covered any fire panel. But when you replace a fire panel, you have to bring your whole building up to current fire code, which my building was not. I had to remove all my pull stations to ADA height. I had to add strobes. I had to add enunciators. I had $90,000 in extra expenses due to code upgrades. That's what ordinance of law comes in. Why is this important in a hurricane situation? Well, if you're an older property that has older windows and they get blown out, well, guess what? You have to, code requirements, especially if you're a coastal property, requires you to put in hurricane impact windows, and there's an extra expense to that. So understand your ordinance and law coverages. There are limits in every policy. We do great free policy reviews for you. So if you'd like us to participate in that program, I'm happy to talk about that and keep the link in the chat for it. But we want to understand this endorsement and make sure that your policy does have it and understand what your limits are for that. When does a hurricane deductible apply? We all have these high deductibles that the board chooses, where it's 3% or 5%. It applies when, when the hurricane watch or warning is issued by the National Hurricane Center. And that's when you're all under there. When we're all under the cone of uncertainty, which seems to get wider and wider every year because they just don't know what these storms are going to do. That's my opinion. After I saw Hurricane Dorian a couple of years ago put on the brakes for 24 hours after every model had it going through Florida, and it stopped over the Bahamas for 24 hours and stood there and then just went north, I'm not going to assume anybody knows what a storm's going to do. But that's when you're under your deductible, and then you come out of that deductible era 72 hours after that last watch or warning is lifted. It's important to preconditions. So a lot of the biggest reasons why claims are denied, other than meeting your high deductibles, is a lot of times they'll say, well, that was pre-existing. You're an older property, that had to be pre-existing, prove me wrong. And we saw a paradigm shift in the way insurance companies think when they were trying to pay decent amounts for claims to now let's delay, deny, and defend. Let's not pay suitable amounts for claims, especially after Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans, because that was, at the time, the most expensive storm. Now it's Hurricane Ian, I believe, is still the most expensive storm. But pre-existing conditions, it's burden and it's on you to prove that these conditions didn't exist before the storm. And, you should have a benchmark report of your property condition before the storm hits. If you don't have that now, talk to your engineers. Those are the best people to get this report. And let's look at the whole shell of the property. If you're an HOA and you have clubhouses, document the clubhouse condition. If you have roof inspections, everybody should be doing annual roof inspections. Keep all the documentation that has to do with the structural, any type of structural issues with the property. All the documentation, keep those records forever. I know you're only required to keep certain records 7 years. Keep them forever because they tell a story. And if you end up in a claim, and Amy can elaborate on this, if the claim goes into litigation, they're going to want to see, well, has the board been maintaining the property the way they should have? And you need to show them, yes, they have. Here's my annual roof inspections as they've been doing. Here's my, those that had to have your 40-year certification, make sure that was done. Milestone inspections are great-ish. I've seen some suspect milestone inspections, but you want a good benchmark report that says, here's the windows and age of my windows and doors, my concrete and roof. Those are the 3 components that are insured by your policy. And those are the 3 components that protect your community. So if you don't have a benchmark report of your current condition, get it. If you haven't had a roof inspection in some time, get one done, because it's your responsibility to show that you've been maintaining the property as you're supposed to per the Florida statutes. All right, windows. I talked about this. I want to touch on this more because windows and sliding glass doors are a hot topic. And the Florida statute specifically says if these damages are caused by an insurable event, and that's the bold insurable event, then they're covered by the association's insurance policy. And then I get a question, but Steve, but my docs say something different. My docs say they're unit owner responsibility. My docs say the association has nothing to do with their unit owner windows and doors. And I understand that. And I understand many documents say it's the unit owner's responsibility to maintain their windows and doors. And if you have certain procedures where a unit owner wants to replace their windows and sliding glass doors to impact or different, you have certain procedures that they have to abide by, and that's wonderful. But in a hurricane situation, which is an insurable event, they are insured under the association's policy. So how do I prove that these things are hurricane related? And these photos I'm showing you are windows that were 25 plus years old. And this was an Irma claim. And when you're able to prove you have consistent damages throughout the property that's specifically related to wind. So when you have a wind event, you have a positive and negative pressure that moves your windows. And they're designed to do that. And the new windows today are designed to go up to 125 miles an hour. But when they move, they loosen, and fasteners may get loosened, and the structural integrity may be compromised. And this is an example. That photo shows frame movement crack with inside the unit, consistent throughout. These photos, the first one shows frame movement again, and you see those cracks consistent. Again, these windows are 23 years old. There's a difference between wind damage or age and wear and tear. And that's why the professionals, the public adjusters, will use our team of experts, our adjusters, to prove that these are damaged due to like to use a lot is if I'm a boxer and I'm in a fight and I get hit with a right hook, knocks a tooth out. Well, that right hook may loosen 3 other teeth at the same time, so they may fall out with a softer blow. Similar to windows. They're no longer rated for 125 miles an hour once they've been through a wind event. So these are things that have to be looked at delicately. We had a client in the Panama City that said, denied the claim. You're under the deductible. You don't meet the deductible. So we had to go in there and prove that the windows and doors were compromised and the railings. And we had to tell, and this is the thought process of insurance companies. They said, okay, we'll cover expenses for the railings to remove them, have them sandblasted, repowder coated, and installed. We had to prove to the insurance company that it was cheaper just to buy new railings. So again, having that representation is so important, just to show the insurance company the easiest method way to do it and doing it the right way. So from that client, it was full denial because they claimed they didn't meet their deductible. We ended up getting them $15 million so they can address their windows and doors and railings. Having representation is so important. So we want to document. You heard John talk about having important documents. A lot of things people miss is that insurance policy. If we have no internet and we have no power and you have no means to send an email or to look something up, have a copy of at least your declaration page of your property policy. Because the first thing I'm going to do is ask for that so I know what policy number is so we can communicate with the insurance carrier. You should be talking to insurance agents before the storm. If we're in imminent impact and we're under a watch or warning, they should be putting the insurance companies on file already, on notice, and be ready to file a claim. Excuse me. This photo here was the property I talked about earlier in Fort Myers Beach. This was the property we had $16 million worth of damage. This shows what flood storm surge can do. That's the foundation of the property. It was damaged along with the first floor. Storm surge is not a joke, folks. That I've seen it bust through concrete walls, toss cars like they're nothing. Construction trailers were tossed a mile down the road from storm surge. It is not a joke, and that's all part of the flood. Closing up here, I'd just like to give some examples. I mean, we had a client. This is a Hurricane Ian client. When they hired us initially, so when I talked about hiring us right after the event or down the road, we prefer to get right after the event so we can set that reserve, the right money, and get that advance payment to you. But this client hired us a little bit later down the road. They were offered $5 million by the insurance company. And the client is like, well, that's not enough, then they hired us. And we were able to get them an extra $10 million. So we were able to get them a total of $15 million for this one. And then there's another one, Boardwalk Capers. This one hired us right after the event. And we were able to get them an advance payment of $4 million in just a few months. So they had enough money to start their repair process. Every building had to get new roof. And we collected over $40 million within the first 8 months. So having a good public adjuster, I'm going to say that because they're like any other trade, your property, your area is ground zero after a storm. And there are a lot of bad public adjusters out there. And there are public adjusters that just work storm season and they chase. And as you know, when you're ground zero, all the contractors, the PA, public adjusters will come in from other states and try to get your business. This is why we do what we're doing. Deal with local businesses, local professionals that have been around a long years, have a proven track record to help you recover from these tragic time periods. And that's pretty much it. That QR code is my contact information. If anybody has any questions, we have a great policy review program to make sure you're properly covered. We take your 120-page policy, condense it down to 12 pages so you have a basic understanding. It's called the Altieri Advantage Program. I'm happy to share it with anybody. I see we do have something in the chat, so let me just check that. Oh, yeah. Floodgates. I want to mention this real quick. Floodgates is a method to protect property. Someone had just put an article in the chat about a property in Naples. It was the first property in Naples that installed floodgates. For those of you who are not familiar with floodgates, we saw them in use from Hurricane Helene at the Tampa hospital. And they surrounded the whole hospital with floodgates. I see a lot of community associations, especially in the southeast side where I'm predominantly at, they'll install them at garage entrances if you have subterranean garages, or just the major door entrances on the roof or on the lobby levels. Look into installing. It's a preventative measure. A lot of people get sandbags and then they scramble for the sandbags last minute, but floodgates work much better than sandbags, but obviously there's a cost for them and there's a time to install them in preparation. So I'll leave that to your procedure, but floodgates are the best method to protect versus water damage on that surge. Any questions? I don't see any other questions, Peggy.
Okay.
We're good.
All right. Well, I think we're good for now. And thank you for that and all that information. There are so many pieces and parts to insurance policies. Get with an expert, everybody that's on there. It doesn't take a minute extra to review what you have. And I think Amy is going to take it away and she's going to tell us why and her experience. And I'm going to turn it over to you then, Amy. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Great job, Steve and John. Really, this is such an important topic, hurricane preparedness. And even when you're fully prepared, it comes as a huge shock. And the board members and the CAMs are just overwhelmed in the situation. So we want to give you some tools today that will help you understand what's going on, understand the process, and have some direction once something does, God forbid, happen. So I'm Amy Boggs. I'm an attorney out of St. Petersburg, Florida. I've been practicing for 26 years. I work exclusively in the insurance, property insurance space, helping policyholders like you get recovery for their claims, deal with the insurance companies, whether it be through litigation or even before litigation, if we're able to get that resolved. I have a small boutique firm. I am a 1,000% policyholder advocate. Not only do I practice in this area, but I do legislative lobbying, advocacy. I speak and write on this topic, and am all sold on helping policyholders. To that end, my law firm is Boggs Law Group. I am happy to talk with any of you offline. I find that it's really helpful sometimes if you have questions about things to just come to me directly, like, hey, this is going on with this, or our insurance is getting this. Steve and Altieri's policy review is a huge thing. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. The first basic tenet of this is understand what you've got. So I'm also happy to look at those things and counsel you and coach you. Sometimes you're hearing these things, it's in a vacuum. And once you're actually working through it, you're like, oh, actually, what does that mean? What did they say about that? So feel free to call me about that. So let's start with the big picture. Your policy is renewing. and you have to submit an application. Okay. I have almost everything I'm going to talk about today is sadly a cautionary tale. And that is because cases wind up with me when something has gone wrong, essentially. It's like you wind up at the doctor or the surgeon when something has malfunctioned. And it is my job to help you walk through your insurance claim, get the carrier to pay what is appropriate to pay. Your carrier is looking at a few things. Steve touched on it. Delay, deny, defend. All right. So with defend, I would say underpay. So they're looking for a reason to deny your claim. They're looking for a reason to underpay it. And of course, delaying it is a huge benefit to them. Think about the interest or investment opportunity. If you have a $40 million claim and they hold those funds for a year or more, think about what the carrier has just earned. So they have a huge incentive to put you through certain paces to delay the timing of the claim and to withhold funds from you. In addition to it being a financial benefit to them, when they delay, you often, of course, an association has an obligation to begin repairs as soon as they can. You're going to have a lot of pressure from your unit owners to do that. And that obligation can run contra to the timing that the carrier is bringing funds into you, right? And so they know that there's a squeeze play going on. And at some point, you're going to have to make decisions about the repairs that you're willing to do or can afford to do. And those decisions may not be made based on what you're entitled to under your policy, but rather under what you can afford to do. And so the longer they can delay a claim, the more they force you into making those decisions. And those things decrease the claim and decrease the carrier's exposure to you for the claim. All right, so let's start with the application. I don't know how many of you have even ever looked at your application for insurance, but I want to bring up one and show you a standard application. Okay, it's a pretty simple document. It's got a series of questions. Often the unsuspecting board president signs this, assuming that the agent has completed it correctly, right? The answers to this can form the basis for a complete rescission and denial of your claim. All right, so I'm dealing with a condominium association right now who has a 7-figure insurance claim. They're in the middle of doing repairs, and the carrier discovered that there are cast iron pipes at the building. Now, this is a wind-only policy, so these things shouldn't be related, meaning the presence of cast iron pipes shouldn't have any effect on whether or not they're going to pay a wind claim. But the problem comes in that the answers to these questions were all just quickly done. And one of the questions was, do you have any cast iron pipes? And they're like, no. Of course, they said no, along with a bunch of other things that the board president really didn't know. And sadly, the agent didn't know. So let's start at the top. Any existing damage to the building? Nope. Are you sure about that? I've had folks who are in the middle of, let's say, a capital improvement project or what have you, and the hurricane strikes. So there is currently existing damage at the building that they're taking time to correct, or they've already devoted or already set forth doing that. So when you say there's no existing damage at the building, just make sure that there isn't any aluminum wiring in the building. I don't know if anybody that's sitting on this call today could answer that off the top of their head, right? Do you have armed security guards? That's a pretty easy one. Structural things, any engineering studies done, unresolved issues as a result of the engineering report. Let's make sure that you don't have oh, the engineer gave you a list of 5 things that have to be done and you're working through the list and you're on number 3, the other 2 need to be disclosed. All right. This particular application also asked how close you are to the water. Well, that was not accurate either. So there are a number of very serious questions that are asked. If you put no and the answer is yes, or vice versa, the answer to that question can have the carrier deny your claim in full. All right. So when you get your application from the agent, you need to go through it. If you need to call the electrician who's been doing work at your property and ask them if there's aluminum wiring. If you need to get a plumber out to look at the property. If you need to go back through and have some of your reports that have been done on the property reviewed to see if you can have those professionals come back out. My salient point here is you must make sure that the application is correct, or it will destroy your claim. Okay, what happens when that happens? Well, there are lawsuits, right? Owners sue the board, owners sue the management company, owners sue the agent. And the agent ultimately has responsibility here, but legally they're not necessarily responsible. And the coverage that they would be able to provide to you is $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, not anything close to what would be need to cover your $40 million repair project at your building. Okay, so my first cautionary tale is know what's in your application, investigate the answers. All right. Second, I want you to understand what's in your policy generally, right? So when I say generally, what I mean is that you should, am I still sharing my screen? Can you see the, hello?
No,
No.
it's not.
Okay, sorry,
No.
let me share again. Sorry, okay. Okay. This is a sample policy. This policy happens to be a wind-only policy. It is 172 pages, something like that. Some of them are more, some of them are less. You cannot possibly understand everything that's in this policy, right? But you should understand the basics. What are your coverages? And it may appear that your declaration page kind of lays it all out. It does and it doesn't. For example, your deductibles. Hurricane deductible here is 5%. That's great. Is that per building? Is that per occurrence? How does that work? So you want to make sure that you understand what your deductibles, and a deductible, for those that don't know, is your contribution, the association's contribution to the claim. And know that where it says 5%, they're not talking about 5% of the claim. It's 5% of your coverage A. Coverage A is your building coverage. So if the total limit of liability for the building is $10 million, then you're going to be in for 5% of that. So that's $500,000 that the association will come up with. And is that per building? And is there a separate deductible for, say, the clubhouse, the pool, etc.? These are things that you should understand. Make your meeting with your agent early for renewal and go through this and run some math examples. What does this mean for the association when we ultimately have a claim? What will we be out? How does that work? You have a valuation issue. So they're going to value your building. You often have the opportunity to insure it to full value or insure it up to, say, 80%. If you insure it for less than the full value, there are certain implications to that. And that may be a financial decision that you want to make. I wouldn't recommend it, but you may want to do that. And that would put you into what's called coinsurance, where The association has said, you know what, we're going to essentially self-insure for part of this building. All right. So understanding what replacement cost is. Replacement cost is the cost to replace something. Actual cash value is insurance that just gives you the value of the item as it stood the day before the loss. So you might have, for example, a 10-year-old roof. The value of that as it stood the day before the loss is going to be different than the value and the cost to replace it. So understand not the 117-page policy, but at least understand the basics of your coverages. Within these coverages, there will also be sublimits and certain other things that will apply. And when I say a sublimit, I mean, it looks like you've got, $10 million worth of coverage. Oh, but only 4% of that can be used for debris removal, for example. Only some of that can be used for mold and cleanup. Only part of that can be used for mitigation. So they have these little sublimits that are built in there. And your agent has an obligation to discuss that with you as the policy is being issued. But they are not going to counsel you after the fact. The counselors after the fact are the public adjusters who are working for you, or later an attorney who understands how not only what's in the policy, but also how the law is applied to that. There are certain laws, for example, if you have a total loss, if your building has to be torn down, there's a law that applies to that that's not written anywhere in the policy. And you, of course, would have no way to know that. So get professionals involved. You only protect yourself. And it's not really, people talk about, well, you've got a CYA, that type of thing. It's really not about that. It's about maximizing your recovery so that you can put your building back in place. Because I guarantee you, if there's an indication that there's some sort of damage that wasn't repaired, the next time you have any sort of claim, oh, darn, you had a hail claim or you have this or what have you, they will go back and they'll say, well, wait a minute. We think this was damaged from back in 2024 from Hurricane Milton. And you're like, well, wait a minute. The insurance company who was adjusting it at that time didn't think it was damaged. You really owe it to yourself to fully vet, not let the IRS do your taxes for you, not rely on the insurance company, but do your own analysis and walk from there. All right. I want to give a couple of cautionary tales about, timing. Steve brought up the fact that you have different, you have a time frame within which to report your claim, and then you have a time frame within which to supplement it. What's a supplement? Well, a supplement is we started working and we realized that there's more damage, or we started working and we realized that it's more expensive than what we thought, right? There are time frames for doing that as well. There's a 1-year time frame, and there's also a 12 or 18-month time frame, depending on whether your claim is supplemental or reopened. And so do you know the difference between those things? No. I'm an attorney working in this space, and this is a brand new statute, and it's very confusing and hasn't been interpreted by the courts yet. So we are cautioning everybody to err on the side of getting it done in a year. What if you don't know until 8 months or 24 months? Well, there are certain ways to work that, but you can't do that yourself. You can't just call and say, hey, sorry, we didn't realize. Can we go ahead and submit that? They would love for you to admit that you didn't do it right. They would love for you to say, oh, yes, we want to reopen our claim, use that language as opposed to we want to supplement our claim. When you don't even understand the difference between those two terms and how those are interpreted, and how one is a 12-month time frame, one is an 18-month time frame. All right. That whole conversation relates to your wind policy or your regular property policy. That doesn't relate to your flood policy. Your flood policy has a very, very, very different time frame, and it's all governed by federal regulations, not even statutes that you can necessarily look up. It's federal regulations. So your obligation to report your flood claim, and not only report it, but submit what's called a proof of loss, where you at least state what you think your damage is. That time frame is 60 days. Anybody here who has been through a loss can understand the challenges of putting together a large loss package in 60 days. It's nearly impossible, right? To understand what your total damage would be. But you have that obligation under federal law. What can you do about that? Ask the adjuster to give you an extension? No. Anything that the adjuster or anyone on the ground does can't affect the federal statutes. Okay. So what do you do in that situation? You have to submit something that puts them on notice that you have this big claim. Now, adding another wrinkle to that, the time frame for submitting your proof of loss often gets extended. Typically, it's out as far as a year in mass, catastrophic events. In Milton and Helene, it was only 6 months, and it caught a lot of people short because they extend it not by 6 months or 8 months at a time. They extend it by another, 60 days and 60 days. So as the expiration of that 6-month period came up, people were expecting another extension and didn't get it. And there's a case on the books right now where an association did not submit a proof of loss until 1 day after the deadline. 1 day. And they filed suit to try to get their claim paid. And the federal judge dismissed the entire thing because it was beyond the time frame. All right. So one of the issues you need to understand is not trying to self-help and walk yourself into an untenable situation that you can't get out of. So I've got about 3 associations right now who are all smart folks on the board who thought they could handle this, had no idea about the proof of loss. The carrier said, don't worry about the proof of loss. Well, they really meant don't worry about the proof of loss for what we think is due. You should be worried about the proof of loss for what you think is due. And they missed those deadlines. And we're now trying to deal with that. And we're in a lawsuit where we have very little leverage because at any point they can dismiss the entire thing. But the association's been underpaid by millions. And it really rests with the fault of the board who thought that they could handle this themselves. All right. So any of the CAMs, really just advise your folks to get good counsel, public adjuster, attorney, and even the association attorneys. I love association attorneys. They're a great resource for me. I talk to them all the time about obligations, et cetera, et cetera. But they are not insurance attorneys and they don't understand this. And so you need to get good counsel. As the CAM, you can be the hero to your folks and say, listen, I've got somebody who's going to walk us through this professionally and fully. Okay. So one last thing on the flood, your time for filing suit, if you don't agree with the carrier, is 1 year from the date of their first denial of anything. And so associations will be like, well, they didn't deny our claim. They agreed that it was flood loss. Yes, they did. But, 10 months ago, they told you they weren't paying for the railings because they didn't think they were damaged by flood. And that partial denial actually forms the basis for a trigger of your statute of limitations. So the point of spilling all of that is to, one, give you some time frames, but also to let you know that you need somebody to help you navigate through this. And when you take it on yourself, first of all, there's no joy in Mudville with that, right? None of the owners are like, gosh, thank you so much for spending 300 hours submitting this and researching it and understanding it, right? They don't care, and you don't get credit. How many board presidents have I worked with that are just worn thin to the bone and trying to handle this themselves, and it's way too big. If you were a regular homeowner, you want to do your own condo claim, your own house claim, okay, but not this, right? You have fiduciary obligations. All right, once you make your claim, you're not making a claim to the agent. You can use your agent to help you, but you really need to be dealing with the insurance company directly. All right, get them to get out there as soon as possible. And you want to document everything. I want to talk about documentation. I want to say Steve did an excellent presentation, and some of the things he said, in fact, a lot of them were things that I was also going to say. I am not going to echo those right now. I'm going to move on to some other finer points, but I just want to, with an exclamation point, say everything Steve said, follow. Seriously. Yeah, seriously, because that's so important, the documentation, etc. So I want to talk about documentation. People are always like, we've got great records. Problems that I see with records. Number one, wonderful that you got people to videotape everything. Great. Have the association collect those from the unit owners as soon as possible. People forget, it's on our phone. Oh, I deleted that. My sister's wedding came and I had to make space, whatever, right? So I was in a deposition. We've been fighting a case we've been in litigation for almost a year. And one of the big issues was the railings. And the association, one of the corporate reps, is in deposition, and the carrier's like, well, we don't know that those were damaged. She said, we have video of the roof peeled off, banging in real time, banging on those railings and breaking. And I'm like, we do? When did we have that? She had never given us that. That was buried in her thing, and another unit owner who had stayed got that, what have you. And I'm telling you, I've got an entire professional team who is asking for records, documenting records, etc. Those things were missed. I'm not kidding you that this case settled within about 3 weeks of us getting that video to them. So part of this isn't just covering your bases. Part of it is giving the carrier the things that they need to settle and pay the claim. And especially at my level, our cases get taken out of the hands of the adjuster who's working on the street and denying stuff and kind of running his own show. And they're now in the hands of an attorney who's looking at, how does this look to a jury? What proof is there? What do we have? What's a judge going to do with this? And so again, that video turned the tide on that. So gather those things as soon as you can. Who's in charge of that? I don't know, but somebody should work with, be an owner liaison to grab those things, not just videos, but documentation of damages. Another thing I want to talk about with documentation, your historic records are important. The carrier will ask for those, and they will ask for those early. So when you report the claim, they come out, they do an assessment, blah, blah, blah. They may ask to do examinations under oath. That's akin to like a deposition or giving trial testimony. What they do in that instance is they ask for a lot of documents, and you have to produce those. They hope that that takes you months and months and months, and you can barely get that done. But you have a vested interest in getting that to them and getting it to them completely and getting it to them in an organized fashion that they can go through it. What happens if you don't get them everything? You get them the documents that you were able to find, you sit for an examination under oath, and guess what happens? During the examination, they're like, well, wait a minute, you replaced your roof in 2012. Who did that? And the deponent is like, you know, we have some records about that somewhere. Oh, you do? Because we didn't get them. Yeah, we have those. Let me get those. And then the dutiful deponent goes back, gets the records, gives them to the insurance company, and now they set another EUO 6 months down the road to talk to you about the new records, right? So when we're involved, we do lock, stock, and barrel everything. Here is everything. And we are bone crushingly clear that we're not going to do another EUO and get caught without the things that we need. All right. So those things move your case along. One hiccup puts you behind 6 months. When you change property management companies, if you're a new property manager taking this on, please try to get the old records. I can't tell you, we're having to subpoena records from 2 property managers ago, and it's not helpful. So you really owe it to your client to get a good set of records from the prior. And I know it's hard because not every property manager is as good as the one that, ones that we may have here on our call today. But that is important. The lack of those records, 1, prolongs the claim. 2, it allows a narrative that says, we asked you for all your maintenance records. In the 10 years before this loss, you had only 10 maintenance records. You have a poorly maintained building, right? So they can use the absence of the records as helpful to them in denying part of your claim. Okay. I'm trying to go quickly so we have time for questions. Okay. Your goal, by the way, in all of this, even if you hire an attorney, is to not be in litigation. Litigation takes this to another level that has its own timeframes that are not helpful. How do we stay out of litigation? We answer questions promptly. We have a good set of records. We work with a good professional who understands the claim. When you start repairing, which most associations do pretty quickly, start keeping those records and keep them well. We have a running repair spreadsheet that you just should add to every week. What's happened? Here's the invoice. Here's the check for payment. Here's a new contract we entered into, etc. Keep those records. We want to be able to hand those over. Cautionary tale about.
If I could jump in real quick,
Yeah.
In the management world, you could even log those expenses differently on your financial statements. So they create a separate general ledger code on your financial statements for hurricane expenses. That way you can keep that ledger separately detailed so you know exactly all your expenses on your financial records.
Yes, great. And also the documents that support them.
Yeah.
Right. So what I'd like to give them is, here's a spreadsheet with everything, and here are all the supporting documents by vendor, by date, however we want to sort them. We can use them so that they are readily understandable. Beware of the loose contract with the mitigation companies. That's a problem that I see that often comes up. You wind up getting into a contract with a mitigation company because they were first on scene. Thank God they're the hero. And they have this loose contract where they may overcharge you. And there's some piece legally that I say, who cares? The insurance company's on the hook for that, right? Legally. What happens though is that if they eat into your coverage and they decrease your funds available for rebuild, that's a problem. I had a property up in Mexico Beach. Almost a total loss. Mitigation of their $10 million policy, mitigation tried to take 5.6 of it. Now they're left very short to complete repairs. How did they ask for 5.6? Well, they had a loose contract. As the poor property manager and board president were weekly asking for a bill, weekly asking for a tally, they were pushing them off on that, right? You have the right to know weekly what the new tally is and to get those records. So you really have to be careful about crazy running up bills. Also, work with excellent contractors. Get good recommendations. Altieri certainly knows a lot of them. I do as well. And so do your other, board managers or boards of other associations. You want someone who understands the landscape, who's going to be able to continue through. The saddest thing for me is I've got folks from Ian and from, unfortunately, Michael, who we helped with their claim. Thank God that's over. They get their money. They're continuing their repairs. 2 years later, they're calling me to help them with the suit against the contractor who stole their insurance proceeds, basically, and didn't do the work. Right? So vet. Protect, protect, protect. And it's not just about dotting I's and crossing T's. It's realistically, it makes things go smoother, right? It makes your claim not just maximize for the point of maximizing. It's so that you can do the repairs and then you have a reputable company do the repairs so that there is not a problem down the road where they're saying, well, the guy you had put the roof on was a fly-by-night company who took half the proceeds and then you didn't do it well. So the next time you have a problem, they come back and say that was pre-existing damage.
And
So,
contractors should never interpret policy language. They
right.
like to go in there. They're not licensed to interpret policy language. If they come in there and say, "Don't worry, insurance will pay for this," they're basically
Yeah.
breaking the law because they're not licensed to do that.
Yes, any contractor that's trying to interpret your policy or say, "Oh, we'll deal with your claim," they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're crossing the line. It would be like Steve saying, "Let me go ahead and file a lawsuit for you." Right? He can't do that. Or me saying, "Let me go out and do an Xactimate estimate for you." Me, myself, as a lawyer, right? I can't do that. Or in your business, you guys are licensed, right? It would be like somebody coming in, who's the housekeeping group saying, "Listen, we can run this whole property management for you," right? Stay in your lane and understand who you're working with. So again, I'm Amy Boggs. I'm going to close so we have some time to ask questions. But the biggest thing that you should take away from today is that you don't know everything about this. None of us, frankly, do. And you need a professional to guide you through. And you're entitled to that, right? When you start taking it upon yourself, again, you're spending a lot of time that you're not getting paid for, and you're out of your depth. And you're giving advice that, frankly, can't be relied on. Thank you.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Amy.
Well, I have a question before, Steve, you look at the other questions, but so you're a specialist, insurance specialist attorney. So if you already have an attorney, an association attorney, can you be hired separately with no issues with your general counsel?
Correct. That's a great question. I often work hand in hand with the general counsel. So general counsel's role is I look at them as compliance attorneys. They keep your condominium association in compliance with all of the laws and regulations. They help you foreclose on liens, all of the things that involve transactions related to running the association. I am a litigator. I am an insurance specialist. I've looked at thousands of properties, thousands of insurance policies that I've fully read and litigated the terms in them. And so when you have an insurance claim, you would want to work with an insurance attorney. And often I will interview with the board with their association attorney on the call, on the Zoom,
Okay.
so that he or she also feels comfortable, right? Because I will work with them.
When we say you're not going to hire a brain surgeon to do open heart surgery.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
The only other thing that crossed my mind, and this came up when you gave your presentation in July as well, and it's to me, it's just like, wow, you got to do this, is that it's never too late, the way I understand it, you explained it, to readdress your application.
Right. Good point, Peggy. Right. Leave here today, pull your application, look at it, make sure that the answers to the questions are correct. If you want to modify that application, go back to your agent and say, "Listen, we reviewed our application and these things are wrong. We need to have those changed." It may change your premium. It may change the company that is willing to provide you insurance. They may have to send it back out. Your agent might say, "Oh, don't worry about that. It doesn't matter." Please don't listen to the agent. The agent has no liability if you do that wrong. The agent has no skin in the game, right?
Exactly.
And so you are going back. They will modify that for you, or should, and deal with the consequences of that. If it means that you have to get a new insurance policy, don't worry about it. Otherwise, you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for insurance that literally doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And you don't know that it doesn't exist until after you've made a claim and you're knee deep in it.
Wow.
And a good example of that is emergency power. So we saw this with Hurricane Ian a lot, where people were renting generators, thinking insurance was going to cover it. No, emergency power is not covered under your flood policy. So those are things. And then our clients are asking, why am I getting an $80,000 bill for this generator and fuel? I was like, because it's not covered. You should have
Yeah,
hired us right after. We would have told you that.
Yep.
exactly. Steve, are there any questions or any things you want to say in closing or?
No, I think we beat the point that you should have representation if a hurricane comes. You know, you have a good team here. We're here to help you guys. I put my contact information in the chat in case anybody had any follow-ups or anything of that nature. I encourage all the sponsors and panelists to do the same. I know Peggy's going to email something to everybody, all of our contact information. But guys, this is so important. And I know year over year, trust me, I was a property manager for 20 years. And year to year, here we go, hurricane season again. But there's just not enough preparation still going on nowadays, and knowledge is power. So hopefully we're able to open some eyes during these discussions. So I thank everybody for joining, and I want to thank our sponsors, and I think we're going to go right into the sponsor introductions, Peg.
Yes, we can do that. I want to tell you this was sponsored very generously by several sponsors that are, a few of them are on. I'm going to start with the one that was on first, and that would be Deneen. Are you still on, Deneen?
Hi, Peggy.
Hi,
Thank you.
Deneen.
Yes, I
There you
am.
go.
Thank you for everyone that's joined. My name is Deneen Barham. I serve as the Regional Sales Officer for Community Association Banking at First Citizens Bank. I cover the West Coast through Central Florida. If you don't know First Citizens Bank, we are a fourth generation family-led financial institution, 120-year history, and proudly recognized as a top 20 U.S. financial institution, headquartered out of Raleigh, North Carolina. Um, Within community association banking, we partner with the property managers and property management companies, and we provide specialized banking solutions for the communities, association loans, lockbox services, and FDIC coverage for deposits over 250,000. What sets us apart, which is related to this call today, is that our association loans to association communities or condos, we don't require a disruption of your deposits wherever you may be banking. And most recently, for one of my clients, we were able to secure 3.2 million in in funding for a loan, if you will, and that was related to a hurricane, 2 years ago. So they've been really struggling, and we're very proud that we were able to help that community. So thank you for joining today. Very informational for everyone.
Great, that's awesome. All right. I also want to introduce to you Matt Quisley. He is with Reserve Advisors, longtime experienced reserve advisor. Matt, tell us about yourself and what do you guys do for communities?
Hey, yes. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for participating. Our firm is the nation's leading provider of reserve studies. We work with communities throughout all 50 states and 30 countries. Been very involved with the legislation here in Florida. We're about 3,000 associations here in Florida, many on the West Coast. So thanks for everyone joining us today. I thought it was a great presentation, and it's not only hurricane season, but it's also budget season. So it kind of all falls on everyone's lap at the same time. So I know it's a lot. On the bright side, it's also football season. So enjoy that for all those who partake. So thank you.
Fantasy football draft week.
Exactly.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you so much. So they are all over the state and representatives on the East Coast as well as KC. And I will be sending out a sponsor sheet with their information on it. Next, I want to introduce to you Jeff Carrillo. He is with RMS BE Consultants, Roofing Consultants. Jeff, tell us about yourself and what you do.
Hello. Thanks for having me on. So my name's Jeff. Our company is RMS roofing and waterproofing consultants. So we have offices based in Lakeland, Florida, and down in Fort Lauderdale. We service the whole state. And where we fit into the conversation is in multiple capacities. I think you've learned today the importance of documentation and opportunities to where you can mitigate the risk of your clients, or if you're actually on the board. What we do is we can help with pre-loss condition assessments and annual inspections that give you the historical documentation of roofing and waterproofing conditions that carrier is going to want to see. We give you a detailed understanding of where you currently are in your aging cycle and how that fits into what was forecasted and modeled in your budgets that Matt just talked about long term. And then post-loss, we help with detailed investigations and condition assessments of your waterproofing systems that Amy and Steve can utilize as a part of their process for documentation and understanding what was pre-loss conditions versus what was actually affected by the storms. So it can help encourage, hopefully, a more expedited claims process by working with all of the professionals in this group. So we're not contractors. We don't do the work. We help provide you peace of mind in making sure that you're taking the right steps and you're making the right decisions that benefit you and the budgets and the building long term and mitigate the risk throughout the whole process. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yep.
We're here and ready to help. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. That was awesome. Okay, next I want to introduce Danny Gurgis. He's with Clarkson and Varick Elevator Consultants. Danny, tell us what y'all do for the associations.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to meet everybody. Happy Friday. We're excited for some football here as well. Go Cowboys. I'm probably going to see a lot of people sign off after I said that statement, so I'm sorry. But there you go, Jeff. We're Clarkson and Varick. We're a national elevator consultant firm, similar to Jeff's company. We're not actually turning the wrenches, but we come in with the brains. We're like the FBI, the elevator companies. We come in, and then if you're having a lot of problems and shutdowns and a lot of contractor complaints, we're here to support you. We're here, your owner's advocate. We're your eyes and ears inside the elevator shaft. I'm one of the founders and owners of Clarkson and Varick, and it's a great passion of ours. So, but unfortunately with the industry, there's a lot of unknowns inside the elevator shaft, and sometimes you might not be getting the honest assessment and then the truths and whatnot. You're getting these repair bills and invoices, and it's good to have that second look and opinion. In addition to being your eyes and ears, we are specialists in new construction. We deal directly with the architects and the developers. Everything from the Hudson Yards Art Festival, Museum of Modern Arts, to the super talls and the smallest associations. We do it all, right? From new construction perspective. And if you're looking at a modernization that's coming up, any code items and restrictions and retroactive code items, we're here to tell you, do you need it or not, right? So you don't necessarily need to do a full modernization. So if you have a lot of these questions about budgets and planning and what we're doing from a compliance standpoint, please definitely feel free to reach out. I'm gonna put my contact information as well. Damaris Cabrera, who couldn't join us today, she's just got a really bad cold, but she was excited to join as well. But we're here to support you guys.
Thank you. Absolutely. And Damaris is on the East Coast, but she covers on the West Coast. So she's kind of like everywhere. So give her our best. Next, I want to also introduce the wind beneath my wings, who actually ran this for me behind the scenes, Vinteum software. I cannot say much how grateful I am to you guys, but they have a phenomenal website program. That's what they do. So let's hear from Laura. What do you guys do for associations? How do they store all those documents Amy was telling us about?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Peggy. Thank you very much. My name is Laura. I'm the head of sales here at Vinteum. So what do we do at Vinteum? We help associations, could be HOA or condominiums. We also work with property management companies and or property managers freelance. And what we do for them is that we help them with the platform to manage the communities they work with or the community that you're volunteering for. So if you need a platform and or the website to be compliant, especially in the state of Florida, to the regulations that you have as a condominium or an HOA, this is why we're here for you. We'll build the website ourselves with all the information you give to us. And then we'll also set up a community platform closed for only members of the community, where you guys can store documents. You can store the insurance policies. You can store the insurance documents. You can store every type of document that needs to be public for all of your residents and with easy access for them as well. We have plans to have a limited storage, so you wouldn't have to worry about having to pay some yearly storage as you do in other providers, for example. And not only that, we have omni-channel tools for communication with everybody within your community via text message, via phone, emails. We will also help you guys with, every type of little process that you have with your own community. We have it in Neighbors and all in one platform. Not only that, but we will, again, set up the platform, set up the website for you, give you guys, either property managers or board members, full training on how to use the platform. And it doesn't end up there. We will assign a specific person or account manager to your community. So the ongoing support is a lot more smooth and easy for all of you, especially if you are maybe new on this community management world. So if any of you guys is interested in that and is looking to improve your community management and have a better tool and support, we'll send our info on the chat, and we'll be super happy to assist you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. I just have a few more vital sponsors as well that I think you would want to have access to, that will be again on that sponsor sheet. Starting with Coastal Design Build. They are based out of the West Coast. They're the ones that actually do the work, general contractors. So they have their number available, small jobs, large jobs, which ties into Velocity Services Group. Velocities is a full service large restoration company, large loss, I should say. And you can reach out to Rick Hogan for that. I also have Karen's Engineering represented today. They were on earlier, but Karen's has 4 offices around the state, and they're adding a couple more. The contact in the West Coast is Nick Dunning. And then we also have a roofing company, Best Roofing, rock solid across the state, getting more and more into the Tampa area, predominantly now into the south part of Florida, but a new office open in Tampa, so they are growing. And then last but not least, I want to mention Southwest Elevators. They are actually installation company for installers for elevators and for any kind of also additional consultation, along with Clarkson and Varick. So I want to say thank you. I hope this has helped you guys in your area. I will be sending out also the contact information to have a on-site public presentation by the City of Tampa with John's team. Again, if you need that outreach email address to set it up yourself, it's Tampa OEM@tampagov.org.net. I think that's very important. It'd be a great time to do it before the hurricanes really hit. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Amy, and all the sponsors. See you next time, hopefully.